There are two major policies that I think have been inflection points in the crisis at the border over the last 5 or 6 years. The first was the Trump administration's Remain in Mexico policy. The second has been Title 42. I want to take each of them individually. What was your experience with what happened at the southern border when the Remain in Mexico policy was fully implemented?
Well, I happened to be there. I was there the week before, and I was there the following week when it was lifted. Nothing. And I was one of the few people to say that nothing was going to happen because Title 42 was in effect and had been in effect for the last over 2 years under this administration. So if Title 42 was in effect, that means 0 people would have been allowed into this country illegally. 0. But 7 million came in. But Title 42 was in effect.
The most ever.
So how in the world do you tell me that when Title 42 was going to be lifted, it was going to be this huge difference? No, we've already been allowing them. I know it was a big buzz and here it comes. But I'll tell you one thing, I was surprised. I was standing there and the gates were open, which is the most ironic thing, that you have this big wall in El Paso, but they opened gate 40 and 42. And we were going back from one to the other, and the news medias were there, and we were expecting the rush. I had been briefed by a Border Patrol agent just a couple of days. He had given me very specific indications of what was going to occur. And that didn't happen. So I thought, well, you know what? I don't even think the agents knew what this administration under Mayorkas was actually planning to do. And what they did, and they're doing as you and I speak today, is moving these people. They're sending the buses across the wall, loading them up and taking them to the port of entry and bringing them in as legally processed illegals, which the numbers immediately dropped. And that's what you're going to hear, the rhetoric. Oh, the numbers, look at Title 42 is gone, and the numbers dropped significantly. The numbers did not drop significantly. You stopped counting them. That's why they dropped significantly. So I think it's even worse now.
Because there's no political pressure, because I mean that sight of people rushing through may have actually kicked Congress in the butt to do something, but now they can hide it.
And even the chief of the Border Patrol said in El Paso, because it happened to be the Border Security Expo at the same time, that they were not going to allow the building of 17,000 people at once under a bridge or by the wall, because they were going to avoid that optic. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, that they're not allowing it. But not everybody's going through a port of entry. Some are being bused to other parts of Texas, Del Rio, San Antonio. I was in San Antonio. The airport's full of illegal aliens. And some are being released to the streets.
It was impossible to get a flight out of El Paso the days after Title 42 ended. That was affordable. And I'm guessing because they were loading up tons of people.
I saw them. I flew out of there, and a bunch of illegals. And so that Title 42 was a farce. But here's the thing about Title 42. You could have actually kept it and enforced it, and because now everybody, obviously it was because of the pandemic and because of COVID. But what about scabies? What about lice? What about tuberculosis? What about flesh-eating bacteria? What about syphilis? What about chlamydia?
And people are coming in.
What
with all
about
of
chickenpox?
Wow.
There was an outbreak of that in El Paso. Well, that if there's a Title 42 reason, you would think that we'll use that as
those are worse than COVID in some cases.
That's right. And guess where they're bringing it? To your neighborhood, to your kid's school. Because I've been saying it for years, you will be impacted in the school systems, in the healthcare systems, and of course the criminal justice system. The hospitals in El Paso overrun by illegals. In McAllen, overrun by illegals because they require a lot of care. Now, this is what this administration is doing. They're showing you a plane, because I just saw a video by one of the sector chief, Gloria Chavez, down in the Rio Grande Valley, standing in front of the airplane. Look, we're repatriating back and we're sending people back. They are. They are deporting some people. They're deporting 5,000 people and allowing 900,000 in. That's the part they don't tell you. So they'll show you, and it's propaganda. Look, we are deporting. We are using Title 8 is going to kick in. And we talked about this. What do you mean kick in? It's the law. It's always been the law.
Yeah.
The DUI laws don't kick in on and off, right? A police officer, it's like, I gave this example, and I thought, well, maybe this is a pretty good example. The mayor tells the chief of police to tell his patrolmen you cannot no longer enforce DUI or driving while intoxicated laws. You will pull them over, and you will identify them as drunk, but you're gonna have to let them go. So 7 million of those. It's ridiculous, right? It's stupid. Yeah. But this is what we're doing. Why is it different? Because it's immigration. Why? You know how much death we've had at the southern border? 1,800 people have died in the U.S. side alone. Just 2 in the last, a week and a half in the custody of the U.S. government. And I'm talking about Americans, and I'm talking about illegals themselves are dying. They're drowning. They're being raped. They've hung themselves by trees because they're disoriented. They've cooked to death by the sun in the desert, in the summer months. Death. Rollovers, the smuggling, and they don't stop. They crash, and bodies start flying, and then they crash into and kill U.S. Americans. I mean, this is what's happening on a daily, weekly basis along the border, along the ranches. The ranchers are fed up. The communities are fed up. Now it's like you have no choice. You will allow them in. It doesn't matter how it impacts your community, but you better deal with it. And you're seeing even sanctuary cities even pushing back now, like Chicago and New York and Connecticut. Like, wait a minute, whoa. We didn't ask for this. No, yes, you did. We've been telling you for a long time. And this is what we've been feeling for years. And now they don't like it because it costs money, resources. I mean, regardless of how you feel about immigration, these are human beings. Mm-hmm. And there's crime, there's health issues, there's schooling issues, there's all these issues, shelter, that all of a sudden you have to deal with.
Yeah. What about Remain in Mexico? Was that real and effective?
Oh my goodness, that was probably one of the best policies that came under the Biden administration and Tom Homan, who was a big...
Trump administration.
I'm sorry, Trump. Did I say Trump? Did I say Obama?
You said Biden.
Heck no. It was under Trump. It was under the Trump. Sorry. It was under the Trump administration under Tom Homan's direction.
Yeah.
Remain in Mexico was because this is what we're saying. The asylum, I touched on it earlier. The asylum criteria is the same. You have to prove to our government that you have credible fear from returning back to your home country because you're being persecuted by that government for your membership in a certain group, your religion, your sex, all that. Most of these people don't qualify under our own criteria because Guatemala has a lot of violence, and because somebody killed your father or your brother, and that doesn't qualify you. We have a lot of violence here too. And so the Remain in Mexico policy was a good one because it said, okay, we're going to give you the benefit of doubt. If you really believe that you qualify for asylum, wait there and we'll process you.
Because most of these people are not from Mexico.
They're not from Mexico. As a matter of fact, they're illegally present in Mexico, and Mexico won't do anything about it. And don't even get me started on Mexico's role on this. This is something that I would want to change in office. That Mexico has a huge responsibility to do something about here. Also under the Trump administration, what did he do? He told, President Trump told the government of Mexico, I'm going to start putting some tariffs on you. I'm going to designate the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. I'm going to do this. And Mexico didn't like that. Immediately, he got them to react and start securing their border. We have to go back. And I now it's beyond tariffs. I think we need sanctions. I think we have this multi-billion-dollar trade that no one wants to deal with because some of the things that are in here probably came through that southern border. But we have to protect our country. Yeah. We could do both. Yeah. We could have a secure border, and allow trade to come in. But they don't want to deal when it comes to possibly hurting one or the other.
Yeah. So let's talk about Congress and where they've been asleep at the wheel. I want to hear your broad critique of Congress, and then I want to hear where you think Republicans specifically have been asleep at the wheel.
Well, the Democrats don't seem to recognize, first of all, that we have a border. So that's the big one, right? Just this past week, we passed the Border Security Act, and not one Democrat voted for it. But what does that tell me? I actually believe, and I believe this in my heart, that national security and public safety, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. The cartels don't care. The guy in the street committing crimes is not going to ask you if you're a Democrat or Republican before he commits the crime. It doesn't matter. What does matter is the policy and the votes that you implement in this town. And we can't seem to break that barrier because of ideology, because it's racist, because of bad orange man. I mean, out of spite, really? Is it because the policies were so good that we're not going to give him a win even though he's not in office? I mean, really, this is where we're at. It's so divisive that I think it really is not that big of a divisive issue. Fentanyl is killed over 100. I think the numbers just came out for last year was 109,000. And by the way, those numbers are going to go up because the numbers that are counted, they're backlogged like 9 months.
Wow.
And they're going to go up. So we have hundreds of thousands, over 200,000 in the last 2 years dead by counterfeit pills through the cartels, through China, and no one blinks an eye. That's 3 9/11s a month that we're suffering here, attacks. But the attacks don't happen to be with bullets. They happen to be with this counterfeit pill, but death is death. And yet the Democrats don't want to recognize that. And as a matter of fact, following up on your question, some of the Republicans don't want either. They seem to think that it's because Mexico happens to be next to us. Oh, if it's in Ukraine, send them money. if it's in the Middle East, if it's 6,000 miles away, go to war. Yeah. It's right here, attached to us at the hip. What better reason? Now, Mexico's being a bad neighbor right now, and I already told you they don't like us. They don't like us. They don't want our way of life. The government. They've already threatened our government. Don't you dare intervene with military. We're a sovereign nation. Da 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 da. What about our sovereignty? What about our protection? What about our Constitution? It's been disrespected not only by this administration, but that of 150 countries abroad. China, my goodness, now they're sending people across. Balloons, people. They're buying our land in Texas, 140,000 acres in Del Rio, Texas, next to Laughlin Air Force Base, 140,000 acres. And they're going to put windmills up there or whatever they call them. They're taking over. And this is the protection that I think that you have to really look on both sides of the aisle and recognize, listen, these are real threats. This is the bigger picture of the cartels and China and the takeover. And look at the Chinese police stations that we already discovered. One in Houston, Texas, and one in New York. What do you mean Chinese police stations? Yeah, they're here.
Yeah.
They're here. They're watching us. Mm-hmm. And we need people to understand the real problem so they could act accordingly with their votes in the House of Congress.